Welcome to another video from Dr. Lock. We're going to be making keys to a Toyota Hilux model 2015 model KUN. Now if this was the 2015 model GUN, we'd have to pull out the whole dash and it would be a completely different story. But this one here can be done by immobiliser reset via OBD. So let's get into it. All keys lost. So the first thing I'm going to try is the 2-in-1 Lishi pick, the 10 cut. So I looked it up on Instacode. It is a 10 cut, being the more modern one, and I do have the right tool. The only problem is, for some reason, my tool did get stuck last time. Perhaps it's out of whack, but I wasn't able to get a good read on it, and it was taking quite a bit of time in the dark. So I did try picking it, because if I could have picked it open, I could have then decoded the combination, saving me having to remove the door lock, saving me having to, pull the door lock out to try and get the code, or pull the lock apart to make a key that way. So it would have been faster if it had have worked. In this scenario, it was just taking too long, so I moved on from this one. But in theory, if you can pick it open, decode it, and then use those cuts in Instacode, it'll allow you to be able to get most of the key, and it's a good place to start. And if you don't have to remove the handle, that's time you saved and less grease on your hands. So let's move on from here. So I've decided to go the old manual way and basically just open it up and pull the lock out. So using the air wedges and the long easy tool, just popping the car open now. Generally speaking, they open up like many other Toyota. There's not a lot of special tricks happening here. And this big easy tool, it actually glows in the dark, which is really good, because black interior, dark parking lot, black handles, it's very hard to actually see inside the car to see what you're actually doing. So it glows in the dark just a little bit, which kind of helps a little bit. Okay, so now we move on to actually removing the lock. And one of the good things about Toyotas is, well, a lot of Toyotas now, you don't have to remove the whole door trim. There's a little grommet just on the side there, and using a star type of Allen key, torque key, I'm not sure what they're called, you can actually just remove one screw on the side. There's a little plastic part in there that makes sure the screw doesn't drop out, which is a really cool design, and then you're able to actually pull the lock out of the handle from the front. So I've done this on a few modern Toyotas and it hasn't been a problem. This one here gave me a lot of resistance to actually get it out. I had to wiggle and jiggle to actually get the lock to come out. It just wouldn't move, even though that screw had been released. Okay, so we have our lock out, and it was one screw on the side, but for some reason there was some little hooks that kind of hooked in here and made it very difficult to get out. So I had to wiggle and wiggle and wiggle to get it out. So now we're going to make a key to it, and on the side here is a code. So we're going to run that through Instacode and see if we can get any match off it. If we can't get a match, then we have to make it via this window here, which can be done, but we've probably only got a few of the cuts. We'll have to try and find the rest of them. Okay, just starting up the Futura, and I think like most people that own a Futura, they're probably kept pretty clean. Reason being is you've got so much time for it to boot up that you might as well give it a full sweep down by the time it boots up. So it's like my old boss used to say, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean, and well, while waiting, might as well. So now I have the lock in my hand and I have the key code, which is stamped on the side of the lock. I decided to run it through the Silka Futura Instacode database and see if I could get a hit from that. I couldn't get any hit whatsoever from it. The code starts off with a P. None of the codes in the database actually started off with a P. They all started off with 5,000 or 8,000. So at this stage I decided to open up the laptop and try and see what was actually in the laptop and see if I could get a hit from there. From there I didn't manage to get a hit either, and I have the latest Instacode on the laptop, the complete version, so I wasn't able to get any hit from that either. So the only other way now to do it would be to actually make it from the window in the side of the lock, and that's basically what I had to do. I could make I could make 8 of the 10 cuts, leaving only 2 cuts at the front, which I had to find. Using Instacode, it gave me a key cutting chart, which then I could use 2 key blanks and keep cutting down and cutting down and cutting down until I found those appropriate 2 front cuts. So after successfully cutting the key for the door lock, which only had 8 of the cuts, I then needed to go through and find the first front 2 cuts, and I did use the Instacode key cutting chart. But basically every time I wanted to recut the key with the Futura, I had to load it, cut one side, drop the shield, lift it up, cut the other side, load it, and it became very, very tedious. So next time I'm going to do this, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get out the HPC card, put it side by side, because it is so much quicker just throwing the key in the HPC, zapping it down a cut, than it is to reload this machine and keep cutting. On top of that, I even had one time where it cut the key a lot deeper. I don't know why, perhaps the sensor wasn't clean enough, but it actually did a miscut there as well, so I burnt a key blank there as well. So of course when you're going through the key cutting chart, it gives you maybe 3-4 options on one key blank and then another 6 options on the other key blank, and of course my one was the one at the bottom, so I had to cut it about 10 times, plus you got to cut it on doubles on both sides. You don't have to, but it's good to cut it on both sides of the key blank. So that's a lot of key loading, and that's a lot of continuing to cut, and the HPC would have been so much quicker. So next time, that's the way I'm going to go. One of the good things about this particular job was the car was right next to the van. If I had to go back to the car each and every time to check it, which you do have to do to find out if you've got those correct 2 cuts, if the car was a further distance, it would have been very, very annoying. So anyway, in the future I won't use a Futura, and I'm just going to use a HPC card, save myself some bit of time there. So now I've actually got the key, and the key's right, and I've put it back into the code machine, and I'm going to cut the actual key blank which can accommodate the transponder chip. These ones are same as the other keys. The only difference is in the head of the key it has a slot to put the transponder key. They're a lot more expensive, so it's better to cut on the flat brass keys and then cut on this one once you've got the code right. Okay, now the lock's ready to go back in the door. Now we have the key. I must say the design of these locks are brilliant. That grub screw, brilliant design. Simply wiggle it back in, tighten up that grub screw, pop on the cap, and away you go. Really good design on their locks. So I'm just loading up the keys with the transponder chips. They're basically a carbon little chips. You put them in this plastic red sleeve and they slide into the top of the key head. With our transponder chips, we like to label them when we get the time, so they come in little bags with little labels on, so that way you can clearly identify what they are, what they're good for, and we try and put every bit of information we can on there, because different people call different chips different things. We like to put in even the brand which they're suited for, type of programmer and things along those lines. Just makes it so much easier. So just putting in the chips, I ran them through the Tango. They were the correct chip. Everything said it was correct. So now it's time to put the key and the chip together and get on with the programming. So here's where things went a little bit pear-shaped. So I read the instructions before going out to this particular car. I've done other Toyotas, but I haven't done this exact particular model. But I thought, since I've got this MVP, I might as well give it a go. The machine says it can do it, and I've got to try and make some return off it, so I might as well give it a go. Being a newer Toyota, I expected it to be quite a bit of a breeze, considering I've done other Camrys and things where you've got to reset the immobiliser, so I wasn't too fearful of it. Because it is a Toyota, I didn't want to break anything or wreck anything, because a lot of these new Toyotas actually have the immobiliser shoved behind the dash, and if something goes wrong, there's no way I want to be pulling out a dash on one of these things. The rough cost for that's about $2,500 is what other locksmiths quote to do that type of job. So it's not something I want to do or be kind of held responsible for if I muck up. So I decided to use the MVP because I've got all the instructions here, and the instructions clearly state use system type 5, using DST80G key transponder, which I checked on the Tango. That's what I was using. And for all lost keys, all keys lost, you need to diagnostically reset and new keys be learnt. So I found that fairly straightforward. There wasn't a lot of information on it. So every time I went into type 5, it had a few options. It had basically program keys, delete keys, and that was about it. There was no immobiliser reset there. And I was thinking that delete all keys was the mobiliser reset, but it actually wasn't. So in this scenario here, I burnt 3 or 4 tokens just at this stage trying to get it to work, because it did not seem to work. The next thing that I thought was perhaps wrong was my chips. So I went back and I learnt a couple of new chips to make sure they're right, and I changed the image to them, and I set them to DST80 Master Toyota G, which should have been correct as well. I wasn't using the Tango for that one, because the Tango wouldn't communicate for some reason that day, but I used the VVDI hand tool and generated the image onto those chips, and that seemed to work and give me look like the correct chips that I needed there. So I've tried it a number of times. I tried it first the 2 times with the original chips, which should have been right. Then I tried it with another couple of chips. So there's 2 tokens, another 2 tokens, trying to do it a different type of way. And basically, it's System 5. There's nothing more that I could be doing right there. The only thing I was thinking is perhaps it might be the wrong chips, but I've tried 2 different types of chips, which should have been correct, and that wasn't working either. So unfortunately, it was one of those situations where things are happening, and it could be the smallest of thing, and you just don't know. Everything should be right, or it looks right, but just wasn't working. So over and over and over we go with this machine. The reason I chose this machine is because I just didn't want any complications, and unfortunately I still had all the complications. The actual machine wasn't working, I found out in the long run, because it hadn't been updated for 6 months. Now this car's 4 years old, so I was thinking the 6 month ago update would definitely include it, but apparently it didn't, and it didn't actually have the reset button on it. So when I was going through and I was going System 5 looking for reset, all the other options I could find, which I was assuming were a reset, like delete all keys, program in new keys, those type of things, I was assuming that was actually the reset process, but it wasn't. So when it says learn new keys, no, that wasn't it. And it also took me through the menu too. It says on the instructions, it says if it times, you got to wait 45 seconds, and it says if it times out in about 13 seconds, you can consider that a fail. It was going all the way through with the chips that I had and all the rest. It was going all the way to 45 and then telling me program complete, procedure complete, everything good. So this is where it just gets a bit hairy and goes backwards and forwards when it looks like it's actually done it, and then you go and try it and then it hadn't. To make that a little bit more complicated, when I tried the keys afterwards, get it out of programming mode, open and close the door, put your foot on the pedal 5 times, do all these type of things. When I'm out of programming mode, I go and try the keys, and at one stage they actually turned on for about 10 seconds there, and I thought, oh great, it's done it, and then of course the car cuts out. But one of the things I did notice here is that using the MVP with everything I had on the MVP at that stage, I could never get the security light to go solid. I was getting 2 and then 3 flashes, 2 and then 3 flashes. So going over that, it basically saying it's not in programming mode. Compared to some of the other cars, Toyotas I've done, where when you do get it and you've reset that immobiliser diagnostically, the light normally goes solid. So I didn't get that. But then again, different models, different things, sometimes they do act differently. So okay, so just in conclusion, I was able to get the keys working, and I was able to reset the immobiliser, and I'm going to tell you how I did all that. And then I was able to get a secondary key going as well. So because the customer was there, I wasn't able to actually video it. I didn't want to frighten the customer, so I wasn't able to videotape it and show you the actual working keys. But pretty much in the end it was as much as you've seen, except I put the keys in, I turned them, and then I did the out of programming mode, which is 5 quick turns on the ignition, and then basically leave the key in for I think 30 seconds or 60 seconds, and that was it. Once I had one working key, I was able to clone it. So anyway, let's go through what happened. So the MVP here, I started off with 20 tokens. Afterwards I was left with about 14. So in theory I would have burned about 6 tokens trying, and I burned about 4 or 5 tokens trying all the features, trying to get it to work with different chips. The chips that were saying should have been correct, but they weren't. So I burned a lot of tokens there. I thought maybe it was one of the buttons I was pushing wrong or something. Then I went down to Toyota, because it was easier to go Toyota than go to my supplier to get another chip. So I phoned a friend and they said no, it's got to be the chip. So Toyota was closer. They charged me about $40 for a genuine Toyota key with the G on the blade. Then I went back to the job and I used up another couple of tokens trying to get it to work there. Still couldn't get it to work. So anyway, I had one key with one chip that I know is genuine, so I know it's good. So anyway, then I moved over to the Lonsdor, And now with the Lonsdor, it actually had a reset function, and I couldn't find, I mean, I don't have Australian vehicles in there, like, this is for Australia, this is this. But when I went through the menu, I went to Toyota, and then it says what region, so I picked China because that was the only region available. From there, I was able to find Hilux, and then I found Hilux, and I found the correct one, the G series, and it had immobiliser reset. So it was a bit scary having to push that button, but I pushed that button, and sure enough, it did the reset, and the security light went red, went solid. From there, I put the key in and left it in there for 30 seconds, and then turned it off, turned the ignition 5 times, and it was out of programming mode, and then we had ourselves a key. I had one key, and then from that point, I didn't have the correct chip to program in another one diagnostically, so I pulled out the VVDI tool, read it, and was able to use one of the VVDI chips and just cloned it over to a standard chip. So that way we have 2 copies. We created a master, but then we also created a clone of the master, giving the customer actually 2 keys which are master. So in the end, it was able to be done. In the end, I must have burned about $360 worth of tokens on the MVP. And in the end, I also had to go out and purchase a genuine Toyota key blank, so we're up to about $400 now. Then on top of that, I also cut the keys, the standard brass keys without transponder head. I probably went through about 6 of them, so there's another $10 in keys there. Then I had to cut into a couple of keys with the transponder shell on top. So all in all, it probably cost me about $420 in about 3 hours of my time. So was it worth it? No. Would I do it again? Well, now I know which tools will actually work. Yeah, I would do it again, and it'd probably be under an hour job. And one of the things I took from this was, even though the chips should be what they are, sometimes they're not. And even though I checked it, sometimes they're not. So there was just a chip issue. Right now, I'm just showing you the Tango had immobiliser reset. I paid $1,000, for that software there to reset Toyota Corolla G chip as well. And I thought, well, since I couldn't reset anything, I thought I might try that as well. But of course, that wouldn't work. That's only for Corolla. And every time with this Tango device, it seems you've got to buy another bit of software. I tried to even generate the chips on the Tango, and it says no, that's another paid option, so I couldn't even generate it. But with the VVDI, I was able to generate a chip, and I did try that, but that didn't work. And with the VVDI, I was able to clone it, and that did work. But what I was most surprised about was the Lonsdor. I put it in, I plug it in, and it did exactly what it was meant to do. Plus, on top of that, it gave me some information on the screen. It gave me more information than the MVP, which I was pretty happy about. It told me if you want to add 3 keys, 2 masters and a sub, do this. And then you scroll down. If you just want to add 2 masters, do this. And then I only wanted to add 1, so I scrolled down to 1, and it says put the key in, turn it, leave it for so long, and then turn the ignition off 5 times. So all this was on the screen. So I found that pretty interesting. So it's another thumbs up day for the Lonsdor and a thumbs down day for the MVP. And it actually did exactly what it was meant to do. I only wish there was more information about this particular machine, such as regional settings. Like, I don't really want to be starting to plug this into customers' cars and then find out, oh geez, I cooked the immobiliser. I think if they had a local dealer or a local information booklet on this machine, it would be a more powerful and more popular machine, because that's what really scares us all if we go there and cook something. And it was only in desperation that I pulled it out and used it, because I was worried about just that problem. You break something, you have to fix it. But I was very happy that it worked, and so far I've used it on a number of cars and it's actually worked. So bit by bit, I guess me and many other locksmiths out there who actually do have it are finding out what it can and can't work on. But the real downside to this Lonsdor machine is that it doesn't have good, clear English instructions and designated cars for particular regions that you can just read. Pick it up, can it do this in my area? How many buttons do I push? Which buttons do I push, and how do I do it? If it had that, I reckon it'd be selling 10 times as more. But yeah. So anyway, end result was 2 keys were done, and Lonsdor saved the day, and it cost me quite a bit on tokens. So that was making a key for a Toyota Hilux KUN 2015 model. And just remember, if it was the later model by a couple of months, the GUN model, it would have been a whole different scenario. And I also relied on the customer to actually line this job up. She told me what model it was, and she told me what year it was. That was another big mistake on my behalf, because when I got to the car, first thing I should have done is pop the bonnet, had a look at that plate, because often customers think they're 100% right, but often they can be 100% wrong. Now, if they're wrong and they tell you the wrong thing and you go off in one direction, you might be preparing or buying tools or buying parts for something that could be completely wrong. So really, that was another kind of learning curve right there. I should have popped the bonnet, see exactly what we're dealing with via the VIN number and the VIN plate, rather than relying on the customer. And that could have been another reason why the keys weren't working too. I could have been working on a later model, thinking I'm doing all the right things, and it's not working, when, you know, if I had checked that model from the start, and if I'd found out it was a later model, then you know, I could have saved myself some time. So relying on what the customer says is one of those things you should never do. You can do it up until the point where you can actually access the car and check the VIN. Anyway, that's my video on making a key, and thanks for watching.